Hello everyone, Storm 11 here. Today we'll be talking about the very cold temperatures that's going to be happening here in Kentucky tonight and into tomorrow morning, and we're going to have an update on that winter storm that's expected to roll into the state Friday and into Saturday. But let's first get started with the current temperatures this evening, and it is getting cold out there, and it's colder this time yesterday. As you can see, most areas are in the teens, and with us being in the evening hours, there are some stations in the state where the temperature is just basically dropping like a rock, and one of those is in Harrison County. I would probably say just a few minutes ago when I pulled up, it was 14. It's already down to 12, so it's already dropped 2 degrees in just a few minutes. Another county where it's dropping like a rock is in Meade County. You just seen this update. It's now down to 9 degrees. In Harrison County is now 10. And you just saw that refreshed. And this, I believe this map here refreshes every minute. So these temperatures are dropping like a rock out there. And the reason why they are is that anytime when you have a clear sky in the evening, you completely lose heating. And where you have that snowpack on the ground, there's nothing containing that heat, so all that heat just goes away and it just goes up in the atmosphere. So this is radiational cooling. It's basically what it is. If you had cloud cover like in western Kentucky where temperatures are still in the 20s, then it's containing that heat from the daytime. So, and where we have some clearing up across parts of northern Kentucky, some of the temperatures up there are dropping like a rock up there right now. And for that reason, we got our first cold weather advisory ever. And some of you guys are probably going to be asking, what is a cold weather advisory? Well, that's a very good question because this is the first time they've ever issued one of these. And there used to be a product called a wind chill advisory. And here's their graphic here. So the old product was wind chill advisory. The new one is cold weather advisory. And I think the main reason why they did this is just to make it a little more simpler for the public. And I also believe they changed the criteria for a cold weather advisory. So counties here in the dark blue here is for temperatures and even for wind chills that go 5 below zero. And then across parts of southern Kentucky, as you can see here, that would include Bowling Green, Somerset, London, Williamsburg, Mayfield. The criteria is 0 degrees, and you can see when you get down to middle Tennessee, it's 5 degrees. And in the farther north you go, the criteria gets colder. Up north, it's 10 below zero. So that means some areas are going to try to go below zero tonight for the temperatures, and it's going to be very interesting to see where some of these temperatures bottom out. But if you got a clear sky, temperatures could be anywhere from 0 to -5 degrees. But if you got cloud cover, which serves as a blanket, then temperatures are going to be in the teens, low to mid-teens to be a little more specific. Areas in western Kentucky, there's an outside chance you guys might manage to stay in the 20s throughout most of the night. But let's check out the hazards out there. So, of course, we got that cold weather advisory, which doesn't show on this graphic here. They don't have the cold weather advisory on this graphic here yet. We'll see if they'll do that soon. But you can see here out in eastern Kentucky in that purple shade is a winter weather advisory. And that's for the snow today. And the snow, I can arguably say, did overachieve. A lot of areas got anywhere from about half an inch to an inch of snow. And some areas I believe got about 2 inches of snow. And I think some of those 2-inch amounts have occurred in eastern Kentucky. But we've seen periods of light to maybe even times moderate snow throughout pretty much most of the day. Meanwhile, in western Kentucky, you also got the other winter weather advisory, which would include Owensboro in Evansville, and I believe, well, not quite in Paducah for that winter weather advisory. That's for our next system Friday. And this pink shade in here in far southwestern Kentucky, which would include Paducah, Mayfield, and Fulton County, is a winter storm warning, and that's also for our storm on Friday. And then this blue shade here, which would include generally areas along and south of the BG in western parkways, and even going into southeastern Kentucky. That's the winter storm watch. And if you want my opinion on it, I think some places will get upgraded to a winter storm warning. I think some other areas could get downgraded to a winter weather advisory. And they are going to make those changes tonight. So we'll see what they do tonight in terms of the alerts. But this is going to be one of those systems where a lot of areas are going to be pretty darn close or going to be right around that winter storm warning criteria. And I wouldn't go too crazy on that. Some areas may be off just by like a tenth of an inch or a few tenths of an inch of snow, and some areas may barely get in there. I'm not going to go too crazy with the criteria this time around because of how close it's going to be. I would rather base this off from the impacts. Where are the most significant impacts going to be in place? Where that's going to be, I think that's where the winter storm warning should be. Areas that would see probably the lesser impacts should be in that winter weather advisory. And that's just my opinion of how they should play this out. But let's look into some weather models here. So let's check out the 18Z NAM model run. This is one of the better models from the winter storm back over the weekend. And we get this high pressure system to go right over Kentucky throughout the day tomorrow, which will keep us mostly dry. And then here comes our system back down towards the southwest. And check out all that snow and even some freezing rain being mixed in there as well. And check out all that snow that happens over Arkansas. And right now, Arkansas looking to be one of the better places of seeing most of the snow out of the system. And you can see how massive the snow shield is. It goes all the way up to the cold front. There's a cold front that's going to be off to our northwest here. And you can see how massive the snow shield really is. So this is going to be a widespread event. And you can see some of those heavier snows down across Tennessee and even down in parts of northern Alabama, northern Georgia. And then you get into the mountains of North Carolina and upstate South Carolina. But you can see how the snow does arrive into Kentucky. It arrives in western Kentucky during the early morning hours, and then it gets into central Kentucky by mid-morning, and eventually eastern Kentucky by the early afternoon. And you can see how the snow just basically goes on all day long. And there will be some pockets of potentially some heavier snow in there as well, but generally it's going to be moderate. There will be some times where the snow does line up a little bit, but overall you're talking about a period of moderate snow ongoing throughout most of your Friday, and eventually most of that snow gets out of here by Saturday morning. And I think we can get some snow flurries and snow showers in the parts of eastern Kentucky as well. Meanwhile, western Kentucky I think should stay mostly dry. So let's talk about some numbers here. So this is the NAM model using the Kuchera ratio for snow. You can see generally across southern Kentucky getting into that winter storm warning criteria. And if you don't know what winter storm criteria is, or what's considered winter storm here in Kentucky, it's snow 4 inches or greater. So that's winter storm criteria for us here in Kentucky. Winter storm criteria is a little bit lower towards the south. I believe in Middle Tennessee, I think it's 3 inches, and then northern Mississippi, northern Alabama, northern Georgia, I think goes down as low as 2 inches down there, is what is considered a winter storm in the deep south down there. But you can see here, everybody in Kentucky gets snow. Everybody does. But some of the heaviest amounts looks to be more confined across the southern half of the state. Meanwhile, in the northern half of the state, amounts a little bit lower, generally 2 to 4 inches across the northern half, southern half of the state, generally 4 to 6 inches, with some locally higher amounts possible. Here's another weather model. This is the high-res Canadian model, and you can see not as aggressive with the snow across southern Kentucky, but then again, most of Kentucky, generally sees anywhere from 2 to 4 inches snow, with some of the higher amounts once again across parts of southern Kentucky with some locally higher amounts. Here's the icon model. Once again, everybody sees snow. A little more enthusiastic with the snow across northern Kentucky. And that might be a little bit overdone. But then again, generally 2 to 4 inches statewide with some locally higher amounts out there. And here's the GFS model. This is another model that performed pretty well on the last system. And you can see heaviest amounts actually more focused in southeastern Kentucky. You can see some areas even getting several inches of snow, but the rest of the state generally 2 to 4 inches. And then the last model we'll look into is the Canadian model, and a little bit closer to the high-res Canadian. Usually these two models are pretty similar with each other. But I almost forgot to mention, look at those heavier snowfall amounts off to our southwest. There's potential for double-digit snowfall totals, and that's something you see on a lot of these models here, like I was talking about earlier down in Arkansas. Could potentially be the bullseye of some of the heaviest snow. There was the NAM, there's the high-res Canadian, there's the Icon, GFS, and then the Canadian. Pretty similar outputs from these models here, so pretty strong agreement down there towards Arkansas. So what's my forecast? Well, here it is, and you can see generally across the northern half of the state 2 to 4 inches, and then generally across the southern half of the state 4 to 6. I'm a little bit more aggressive than compared to some other models. I'm going to explain why here in a minute. But you also notice here, both of these areas here got a plus sign at the end of the high end range. So 2 to 4 inches plus, and then 4 to 6 plus. The plus sign indicates the potential for locally higher amounts. With these type of subs here, sometimes you'll get what's known as deformation bands or deformation bands. And what they are is these bands of heavier snow, and that's where you get some increased lift in your atmosphere. And when that happens, you get these bands of heavier snow. Now, these are not terribly widespread, and usually these are more localized corridors. And I think that's going to be possible with this setup here. Now, the problem is that the models at this range, most of them cannot see those deformation bands. That's something for the HER and the high-res NAM to kind of get more in depth with, and even the rapid refresh as well. So that's going to be something for tomorrow. And unfortunately, it's impossible to predict exactly where those deformation bands are going to be. And I honestly can think it could be almost anywhere from the state. But even though these models can't see those deformation bands, you can kind of tell a little bit with some of these models here where they indicate these potential for locally higher amounts. Like the high-res NAM, it's got some locally higher amounts in southeastern Kentucky. And if you go to the high-res Canadian, okay, it's a little bit farther back to the west, and it's even got some locally higher amounts for like southern Illinois into southeastern Missouri. And there's another little area down towards far southeastern Kentucky, though that might have something to do with the higher elevations. And then here's the Icon model, and it's got that potential for locally higher amounts actually along the Ohio River from Paducah through Louisville up towards Cincinnati. And it's also got the potential for locally higher amounts in southeastern Kentucky. And then you go to the GFS, it's also got that potential for locally higher amounts in southeastern Kentucky. And then the Canadian model doesn't really show any areas for locally higher amounts. But then again, medium range guidance just cannot really see these deformation bands. But some of the models can sometimes show that potential for those deformation bands. But that's going to be something for tomorrow. And when we get a better idea of that, you may see this map here change a little bit more. But I think it's a safe bet to put these plus signs in there just to indicate the potential for locally higher amounts, because if you do get within those deformation bands, there's a very good chance you may exceed that range of 2 to 4 inches or in that 4 to 6 inch zone. So I think that's the safest way to put it in this forecast for today. But here's the National Service Louisville's forecast for snow, and you can see across most of the state here actually has an opportunity to get to 4 inches. During the northern half of the state, 3 to 4 inches with some slightly lower amounts here and there across parts of northern Kentucky. I'll go on the statewide view here in a minute, but you can see there across southern Kentucky could be anywhere from 4 to 6 inches. And here's the statewide view right here, and you can see kind of similar to my map here. Generally across southern Kentucky with the higher amounts, slightly lower amounts the farther north and northeast that you go out there. And it seems like the National Service offices got a pretty decent agreement here, which is pretty good to see. And let's talk about the boom and bust potential. And you see here's the other two graphics here. So this is the situation where what happens if this system here overperforms expectations? Well, this is what could look like. And you can see everybody in Kentucky could get into winter storm warning criteria, at least 4 inches, but still across southern Kentucky could be anywhere from 6 to 7, and then the rest of the state could be anywhere from 4 to 5. And that's what happens if the system ends up overperforming expectations. What happens if the system busts? Well, you can see generally statewide anywhere from 1 to 3 inches. So regardless if this system is going to bust or ends up overperforming, we're going to see snow regardless of the scenarios. But going back to the original forecast here, you can see, on the original forecast, most of us is going to get a pretty decent amount of snow with some pretty good snows across southern Kentucky, which is going to bring some issues onto the roads, especially for the Friday afternoon commute, and also especially for Friday rush hour. That might be a mess, especially in highly popular areas like Lexington and Louisville, and maybe even up in Covington as well. So it might be a mess out there. But here's the good news about the system. I forgot to mention this earlier, is that there's not going to be any ice. Here's the ice accumulation forecast. Nothing. So that's good. That's something that we like to see out there. No ice with this storm system whatsoever. And there's one more thing I wanted to talk about before I end the video, is what's going on down in Texas right now. So this is one of our systems here. There's actually going to be two different systems, and they're going to try to phase together or try to come together into a bigger storm. They're going to kind of fail, but they're going to try to come together. This is one of the pieces of energy which is currently sitting across the desert southwest into southwestern Texas and down Mexico. This is also the same storm that brought the devastating wildfires in Los Angeles and even those destructive winds. We had a 98 mile per hour wind gust not far from Los Angeles, which is pretty insane out there. And this is the same storm system that caused those destructive winds. And this is the current radar down towards Odessa, Texas. You can see here, decent amount of precipitation out there. And as we look through some of these reports, there's a couple reports for ice pellets or sleet, and then just some regular old rain. And there are some reports I did see earlier with some snow being mixed in. Let's look at the weather models, seeing what they're thinking of what's happening right now. So this is what it looks like right now. Here's a look at the NAM model, and you don't see anything. The NAM hardly shows any precipitation down there. Let's go back to radar. So this is what it's what it looks like right now, this is what one of the models think of what's happening right now. The models are not doing very well. Let me show you another one. This is the HRRR, which is a model we'll look into tomorrow. And once again, hardly anything out there. What about the rapid refresh? Hardly anything. What about the GFS model? It's got a little bit more, but also not seeing much out there. So you kind of get the gist of what's going on down there. Oh, let's look at the high-res NAM. Also not showing much of anything. So here's a problem here. The models are underestimating the amount of moisture with the Southern system. Now here's the thing about the Southern system. It's got moisture connections not only from the Gulf of Mexico, but it's also got moisture coming from the Eastern Pacific. This system's going to be loaded with moisture. And this system's not going to have any trouble fighting dry air because it's just going to be loaded with moisture. And the models are probably not going to handle that very well. And this is honestly not surprising to me to see. So what does this mean? Well, there's a pretty decent chance, or I should say there's a good chance that the models are probably going to be underestimating the snowfall amounts right now. So the models I just showed you with the snowfall amounts up here in Kentucky, like this is the NAM, this is the high-res Canadian, this is the Icon, GFS, and then the Canadian model. Some of these numbers may actually be underdone because the models are downplaying the amount of moisture that the Southern system has. And we already got cold air in place. We don't have to worry about cold air. We got snowpack. It's going to stay cold throughout this entire event. So with having more moisture with the system means there's going to be potential for more snow. So now it's going to be interesting to see how the next update of runs are going to show. And that's going to be coming out here. The new HRRR model is coming out right now. And then the NAM model comes out within the next hour. But it's going to be interesting to see if these models here can actually adjust to what's actually happening in southwestern Texas. Because right now the models are really underestimating the amount of moisture with the Southern system. And another thing too, most of the models actually underestimated the snow today here in Kentucky. So what this tells me is that these models here, what they could be showing for Friday's system could be underdone. And that's actually kind of the reason why I'm a little bit more aggressive than what the models are showing, is because they may very well be underdone with the snowfall amounts. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the models are going to trend over the next several runs here. And if they do adjust to what's actually happening in Texas, we may very well see an increase of these numbers here up here in Kentucky. So it's going to be interesting to watch and see what happens there. But we'll find that out either later tonight or tomorrow. Now, behind this system, the temperatures do stay cold, and really, it's going to be hard to get above freezing. When you look at the next 7 days after the system, there really isn't really a day that we can get above freezing. There's actually the potential for 2 more snow chances next week. I think the first one is Monday, and then the next one is next Wednesday. And both of those have to deal with cold fronts. And normally cold fronts don't have a lot of not Arctic air, snow with it. But that's going to be our next snow chances to watch after the system. And both of those cold fronts will bring another reinforcing shot of Arctic air. So winter is here to stay until further notice. But anyways, guys, this is all I got for you guys today. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys like this video, hit that like button. If you really like my channel, hit the subscribe button. Hit the bell notifications so you never miss an upload. If you guys got any questions, you can put in the comment section down below. Alright, you guys questions. I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye and have a good day.